I take the microphone and start talking. This guy Connie had never seen turns to her and she said, "I hate that guy's voice." And she said, "Yeah." And he said, "Yeah, when that guy talks, man, it's like fingernails on a blackboard. I can't stand hearing it." And Connie said, "I like his voice." And she said, "You like that guy's voice?" And she said, "Yeah, I love that guy's voice." And she goes like this. She said, "You know what I really love it?" She goes, she leans in, he leans in, and says, "I really love it when he wakes me up in the middle of the night and says, 'I love you, baby.'" Anyway, true story. True story. Mayor, thank you. And I've met the mayor's son, the mayor's wife, two of the mayor's brothers, and the mayor's parents, whose father used to live in Mansfield, Ohio, where I grew up. So, Mayor, thank you. And we got a brief tour of the city, but I talked to other people, and I've talked to a number of people whom you know pretty well over the last couple of weeks, and just
checking in on me, make sure.
What's happened in the city in the last 10 years, including what you were telling me walking in, is just phenomenal. And we went over to the Hope Health Clinic, and having Jim Clyburn as your congressman, he's not technically your congressman here, but he kind of is the congressman for the whole state in terms of delivering things. And he's your, and what happened, that just for those of you that are newer here, particularly for you, the young men that play tennis in North Carolina, and I can't believe you're here, that Friday night your tennis match got rained. Now, we don't even play tennis in March in Ohio, but anyway, your tennis match got, so you end up here, but thank you. But the city was divided pretty much in by the railroad track, as too many American cities are, by race, by income, by the railroad tracks. And there was a huge junkyard on a 20-acre site, more or less there, just north of the railroad track, including an old airplane. I don't know how an airplane got into the junkyard. I don't know how you move an airplane. If you fly, I don't know. Anyway, but Clyburn used a federal program on
brownfields.
Yeah, brownfields. Yeah, brownfields to clean it up. In those, it's not just cleaning all the junk out. It's the soil and all the things from the contamination. So it's not cheap. And then they used Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, to build that clinic, the Hope Health Clinic. And it's another thing that what Obamacare did, what that the Affordable Care Act did for this country. It made for cheaper prescription drugs for seniors. It built a lot of what are called federally qualified health centers, few as nice as this one. And some of you, I'm sure, who have insurance go to that clinic. You pay through your insurance. Others who are lower income get their health care there, and it's the same health care with the same doctors and the same quality. And it really tells me how government can do the right thing and really, really matters. So thanks for the tour, and thanks for the service and all that you and your family have done. I won't talk long. I'd like to hear your questions. But I want to just tell you a little bit about sort of what we're doing here and a little bit about me. As I said, I grew up in Mansfield, Ohio. My mom grew up not far from here. Not that close, near Atlanta, in a little town called Mansfield, Georgia. So my mom from a town of 500 people, Mansfield, Georgia. My dad from Mansfield, Ohio. Met during World War II when my dad came back from the service. My mom was working for a federal agency that later became the CIA. And she wasn't like a spy, but she was working there. And they met at a soldiers' dance when my dad came back from the service and moved to Mansfield, Ohio. My mom was always, as a southern white girl in a little town, she taught me about civil rights as a kid. She was head of the Young Women's Christian Association, the YWCA, which, if you know the history of that organization, you know they were a civil rights organization and a women's rights organization. And that's how my mom raised me. My dad was a family doctor who made house calls until pretty late in life and often worked without charging people that couldn't afford it. And that's where my politics came from. That's where my views came from. And that's why I do what I do. I had never really thought much about running for president. I don't know if that's going to happen still yet. But we thought that it was important that Democrats talk to working class voters. And we Democrats typically play to our progressive base, and I do that. I'm a progressive by any measurement, will continue to be, because I think government should be on the side of people who have less advantage. And history is a battle. Emerson said once, history is a battle between innovators and conservators. The innovators, the conservators want to hold on to their wealth and privilege, and the innovators want to move the country forward. And that's who I threw in with a long, long time ago. And so, but Democrats talk to progressives, but Democrats have got to talk to workers. We don't win, we don't win states like mine in the industrial Midwest. We don't win states much of anywhere except the most liberal coast states on the coast unless we talk more to workers. And that's why Connie and I set out starting in January. We're going to the 4 early primary caucus states. We went to Iowa. Believe it or not, it was 16 below zero, wow. Which we're not even used to. In fact, we had a round table with farmers, and we weren't sure they were going to show up because they had to get their cows in. They're very hardy cows indoors. Then we went to New Hampshire, which was cold, but not as cold as Iowa. Then we went to Nevada. And then came here, and we're calling it our and we're calling it our Dignity of Work listening tour because I'm talking to workers about what they do for a living. And dignity of work to me means that we don't in this country honor work the way that we should. Connie talked about, or actually the mayor talked about people who are invisible, people who clean rooms in this hotel, people who serve food. People who work on farms, people who work in all kinds of businesses where they're frankly invisible. The best example recently of that is when the government shut down, when Trump shut the government down, 800,000 workers were furloughed or went to work and didn't get paid. The stories often didn't include about 100,000 people that were contract workers. They were the people hired by companies. The government paid the company hired the workers to serve the food and to provide the security and to do the custodial work on federal facilities. Those are workers making $10 and $12 and $15 an hour. They never got back pay. They went 35 days with no pay, people making $12 or $15 an hour. A handful of us in Congress tried to get back pay for them when the government was reopened, and the president wouldn't do it, and Senator McConnell wouldn't do it, and that means 35 days without pay for somebody making $25,000 a year. What it meant for a lot of them is you go to a payday lender and you borrow and then you borrow and you borrow and you end up down that irreversible hole where you end up getting evicted and all the things that happen. I mean, that's why the dignity of work matters so much to me. It's about wages. It's about recognizing people who simply don't get recognized enough, but it's about all kinds of work, whether you punch a clock or swipe a badge, whether you work on for tips, whether you work on salary, whether you're taking care of an aging parent, whether you're raising children, whether you're working for a not-for-profit, whatever work you do, it's about honoring work, it's about wages, it's about benefits, it's about a safe workplace. I talked to a bunch of hotel workers the other day in Nevada, and they talked about the safety of the workplace when you're cleaning rooms, believe it or not. You know those stories. And the safety of the workplace in construction, or the safety of the workplace if you're a food service worker. And it's about child care. We were in Laconia, New Hampshire, and a woman said to me who is probably close to my age, and she's been working in child care for decades, and she said you need to look at child care as a public good. That means that child care, we subsidize transportation, we subsidize city parks as we should, we subsidize health clinics. We should look at launching and nurturing and launching children as a public good, because it's not just for those families that so often can't afford or can't find child care. It's also for the good of society that kids get off to a good start. So that's what we're doing. And should I mention that? What else? What's that? Oh yeah, last thing. One of the things my mother taught me, as I said, was about civil rights. I remember after Dr. King's assassination, I was 14 years old. Pastor and I were talking about this earlier. And my mom I got a group of my friends. I went to, you'll love the name of the school, I went to a junior high called Johnny Appleseed Junior High. That's not like the coolest name ever. And I think I was sophomore in high school by then, but we put these interracial dialogues together in a community that really wasn't thinking much about that after Dr. King's assassination. Sometime later, I became Secretary of State of Ohio. One of the jobs as Secretary of State is to run the state's election system. And in those days, there was frankly more bipartisanship. Republicans who now suppress the vote. In many cases, they stole the election in the state next door in Georgia from Stacey Abrams. They have done voter suppression in my state through purging and changing voting procedures and all. But one of the things, when I was Secretary of State, there was not the hostility from one party to voter registration and to expanding the vote. So we did something kind of cool. I talked to a lot of businesses about helping us to do voter registration. McDonald's Corporation stepped up. We got them to print literally a million tray liners. When you go to McDonald's and you get the plastic tray, they put a piece of paper on it as a placemat, right? In these tray liners, they said McDonald's, but they were also official voter registration forms, sanctioned by my office. And so we got probably 10 or 12,000 people registering to vote on these tray liners, and you could go to the Board of Elections at Canton or Youngstown or Toledo or Mansfield, and you'd find registration forms with ketchup stains on them, but they counted, and they were real registration forms. So it's that kind of new ideas we need, and we're here to figure this out. So questions and comments, and thanks for the tenant. And your school is, tell us your school again?
Durham Academy.
Durham Academy. Okay. You're in North Carolina? Where?
Durham.
Oh, Durham, okay, cool. Yes.
I have a question. With Obamacare being possibly dismantled, what is the next positive step to move towards healthcare?
Okay. Question was she said Obamacare possibly dismantled. First, we're not going to let it be dismantled.
Okay.
They were one vote away a couple of years ago when Senator McCain voted. Senator McCain, and you may remember that night. Remember that when McCain came out like that? Well, I'm talking, there were actually 3 Republicans that voted no.
Right.
Lisa Murkowski, you know the story. Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins and McCain. And I was talking to Lisa, and McCain came out, and so I was talking to Murkowski the next day. We're walking down the hall. I said, I suppose it occurred to you that you and Susan voted no, but the old white guy got all the credit for killing it, right? She said, yeah, that occurred to us. Because, the 2 women voted no early and then McCain. But we're not going to let it, number one. Number two, a new president should do 3 or 4 things. First, you stop the attacks on the Affordable Care Act by Trump in terms of taking away the marketing dollars, taking away the navigators, so it's harder to get on the Affordable Care Act. Second, you fix the pre-existing condition, consumer protection. So you guys probably don't think a lot about health insurance, but if you're sick, an insurance company, if your parents are sick, an insurance company can just cancel you like that, except the government says, no, you can't cancel somebody because they're expensive to insure or because they're sick. So we would change that. We should do Medicare buy-in at 50. So if you're 53 years old, you lose your job, or say you're 59 and you run a business and you want to retire, but you can't get insurance, you can then go into Medicare at an early age. You pay for it, but you pay a reasonable rate for insurance, and then you're part of Medicare. Those are the things that we should do immediately with a new president and a new Congress. Anybody else? I'll stick around if anybody wants to just talk individually. Okay. Cool. And thanks for coming out. Friday night is not as long as